So we now, and I'll get back to the phone, but it is White History Month. We have a White History moment for you. It's amazing. And my producer is here. Nick, the anchor baby.
What is up? What is up? Good morning.
He's also the host of Nick Stream.
Yes.
On Fridays at 4 p.m. Pacific time. You went for a long time this past Friday, right?
Yeah, I think I streamed almost 5 hours.
Whoa.
Had to do a makeup show for all the Undying fans out there, or something like that.
There you go. White History Month. Let's have it.
Yeah, we got a White History moment for y'all. Well, we've been talking about Revolver, ego, a couple of things that have been topic as of late, right?
So you finally saw the movie.
By the way, yes, let me just get that out of the way. Yes, I saw the movie.
After all this
Revolver.
time.
All
Okay.
this time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great, by the way. It was okay. It was okay. It was an okay movie, I guess.
Oh, wasn't that? You didn't. Oh, okay.
No, I'm
Nice.
joking. I'm joking.
Oh, you kidding?
I'm just messing with you.
Oh,
But anyways,
what the?
for the White History
I don't know
moment.
what to think now. What the? Well, you messed up that moment.
No, it's not messed up. We're still here, and it's still White History Month. But basically, what I want to talk about is a little bit on the origin of the word ego, basically, because that's what the movie was about. No, the plot or subplot even of the movie was about the ego. They dealt with the ego. And so just a little bit on ego. It's a Latin word. Latin, white.
Nice.
Greek. Also has Greek roots. Isn't that also white? Ego, from the Greek word ego, meaning I. It's referring to the self.
Yeah.
But the word ego, as we're talking about it, was made famous by this Austrian neurologist named Sigmund Freud. And you may have even heard of him.
Yeah.
But Sigmund Freud, now, I want to just preface this quickly, though. It is White History Month, and I'm not quite sure if he was exactly quite white, at least normal white or whatever. So he may have been Jewish, but this concept of the ego and psychoanalysis, was continued by Joseph Breuer, for example, so don't worry, it's white. But my point here about this Austrian neurologist, Sigmund Freud, is just this work on the ego, and putting it into words, how the ego is like a separate thing from the self. Now, I don't know if Freud, from what I've read and what I've looked into, I don't know if he went as far as to totally say the ego is completely separate and totally different from the self.
Right.
He called it the ego was part of a system in the psyche called the ego, the id, and the superego is what Freud talked about.
Nice.
Now, the ego was the id was the part of you that is just like an animal. Just like, I'll eat, I'll do that, whatever season does, right? The ego is the part of you that's like trying to deal with the id, and it's like commenting on everything and trying to control the id.
Amazing.
And the superego is the part of you that's commenting on all that and saying, well, that's making moral value judgments, saying, okay, you shouldn't have ate that much, you shouldn't have done that,
Right.
and so that's how Freud saw it. Just so, yeah. I don't want to harp on that, but it's pretty interesting his work.
Interesting.
It's quite interesting that this person, and I want to say this real quick because he's like a more intellectual type person, this Sigmund Freud. But it's still interesting that someone like him was able to at least have a sort of what's the word? Like self-reflection to at least come up with some of these concepts.
And that's what we, as human beings, are supposed to do: self-reflect.
Yes.
So that we can understand, because once we understand what's happening inside of us, we will understand the world, what's happening inside of others.
Yeah. You might also find it interesting. You might even know this. Freud's commentary on his mother. He had an interesting relationship with his mother. He was also had some fame for talking about the special relationship between boys and mothers. That he analyzed his feelings. I'm reading here from this biography. He analyzed his feelings and relationships dealing with his mother. He came to realize that as a boy, he had wanted to marry his mother and saw his father as a rival for love. So
What? Nah.
we've talked a little bit about the mother complex and
Yeah.
the weird relationship that happens between them.
That's why every human being, well, not that's why, but that's an example of why every human being who born through the mother must be born of the spirit of the father. Otherwise, you're stuck. Unless you're born of the spirit of the father, you're dying and not living. That's deep. So he had a love for his mama. Want to marry mama.
Yeah. And instead of, he could have at least, it's interesting how to arrive to a lot of these topics, but then you may get like lost in the sauce, not really analyzing, because the guy had his own issues. He wrote this whole text called Uber Coca about cocaine, not realizing back then the negative effects of cocaine.
Right.
And he would write about how, it's an incredible thing to combat my depression. So he admitted having depression. And
This
stuff.
guy
So,
did?
Yeah. So he was going through stuff. So yet was able to kind of self-analyze. So it's interesting.
And so even though he was dealing with the ego,
Right.
he was still depressed and on medic and under and
Yeah,
was
yeah.
he
He was
taking the drugs?
self-medicating with cocaine.
Wow.
Yeah. They didn't know the effects back then, but yeah, he wrote a whole like thick text called Uber Coca, all about this, about cocaine. So he thought it was great.
What? Nah, I didn't even know they used drug way back then.
Yeah, that cocaine was found in like over-the-counter stuff. Like it was like advertised as like a benign thing
Really?
until people started getting addicted.
Amazing.
Yeah.
A white history moment.
A little white history moment, and I saw Revolver.
And did it help you? Did you
Can I
get
say-
anything from it? Personally?
Yes, and
So
and
you did.
I got
I don't
something
know
from
now,
it.
but did it help you?
Were
Were you
helped,
just joking just now?
I was just
Oh,
joking.
okay.
Because you've been talking up Revolver, and I wanted to come and deflate and be like, "Oh, it's all right."
Oh,
I'm
so
just messing around with you.
so it did help you.
It did help me.
Oh, okay.
And this is what I took from it. This is what I took from the movie, because there was this part. You're aware of Avi, and I forget the other guy's name. The two people he was in jail with.
Right.
So there was a moment where Jake Green, the main character played by Jason Statham, he's giving away all this money. Spoilers for those who haven't seen it, but he's giving away all this money because these two guys are basically conning him.
Right.
They're basically forcing him to give up all his money.
Yep.
But there's this one particular moment, and it has stuck with me since I heard it. Avi, the guy played by Andre 3000, says to Jake Green, "The reason you give the money away is to hurt him." And what he's talking about, what he's referring to is hurting him is hurting the ego.
Yeah.
Hurting Satan, really, because I'm aware of what the ego truly is. But that's what he said to him. He said, the reason you do that is to hurt him. And that stuck with me, even though we've been talking about the ego.
Yeah.
I've been aware of the show and all that. When he said that, something inside me made me want to commit to hurting him,
Yeah.
hurting the enemy.
Yeah.
Because it's the
The ego.
enemy. You literally have an enemy inside. And so I don't know, that scene just made me want to commit to that.
I remember in the movie when he was forced to give his money away.
Yeah.
He would talk about. He would say in his head how painful it was to give his money. He was doing it, but it was so painful.
Mm-hmm.
How painful it was to give away the money, and that is to not him.
Exactly.
Also, one other thing so many things stood out, but another thing that stood out in the movie when they were playing chess, he and the black guy were playing chess. The black guy was better than him because he's the one that taught this guy how to play when they were in prison. But the guy didn't know that it was the black guy that was helping him. And they would build up his ego, telling him how good he was at chess. And how did you learn to do that?
Yeah.
And he would feel all good. He would explain everything, not knowing that his ego was being built.
That's so funny. Yeah, he's like, yeah, rule number one, never da-da-da. Rule
Yeah.
number, and he's like, and in that moment, the music and everything makes him seem all cool, but he's literally talking to the guy who made those rules.
Right.
So you're an idiot.
And then in the very end, the black guy beat him
Right.
because he was trying to make the point that when you have an ego like that, people can build you up and tear you down. They can make you feel good and get all
Right.
your information, or they make you feel bad and they got control of you.
That's a good point. Can I ask you quick? Do you think they were real?
That
The black guy and the chess player and the do you think they were real, or were they just in his head?
Interesting question. I think they were real.
I'm not quite sure, because there's scenes that kind of imply they weren't, and scenes that imply that they were.
What scene when they
The
were
scenes that imply that they were that they weren't was this one moment when Andre 3000 Avi Jake Green is saying something in his head, but out loud, Avi responds to what he's saying in his head. So it's like, well, how did you know what he was saying in his head?
Yeah.
But then there's other and you don't really see a lot of other people interacting with them. Only Jake Green talks to them.
Right.
But then there's I forget another scene that implies they're real, so I'm not sure.
I wouldn't knock it because so much you get from it every time you watch it. So maybe. So you watched it yesterday after the church service? Mm-hmm. Oh, you did? Mm-hmm. Nice. Finally. We've been talking about it forever.
Well, there you go.
And we're not getting paid to talk about that movie, folks. So I know we've been going on and on.
I'm trying to get us paid for talking about it, but hold on.
We've been going on and on and on and on about it.
Yeah.
Amazing.
No, thank you.
Well, thank you for the White History Moment.
Of course.
That was amazing. Amazing.